Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Work From Home Show. I'm Naresh Vissa with Adam Schroeder. Today we have Andrew Gruel on the show. First off, shout out to all our homies, homeboys, homegirls, home trans, all the work from homers out there. Adam Gruel is a judge on the Food Network's Food Truck Face Off and host of FYI's Say It to My Face. He's the founder, CEO, and executive chef of Slapfish, a seafood restaurant franchise based out of Huntington Beach, California. He also is the CEO and executive chef of Big Parm, a pizza restaurant in Tustin, California, as well as Two Birds, a chicken restaurant in Irvine, California. So he is an extremely well-known food entrepreneur and chef around the Los Angeles area. Andrew, welcome to the Work From Home Show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I want to start. Let's first start with an initiative that you started at the end of 2020. You started a fund to raise money for out-of-work restaurant industry employees. So can you tell us a little bit about this fund? Because a lot of these employees are listeners to our show. They found themselves stuck at home, no work, especially in California where you had government mandates and lockdowns. So why did you start this fund? What is this fund? And are you doing anything to encourage the out-of-work restaurant industry employees to develop their skills so that they can maybe even switch industries or job functions?
Yeah, so originally we kicked this off without much planning around the end of November going into December. Here in California, they shut down outdoor dining for the third or fourth time, and outdoor dining was really the vehicle through which a lot of restaurants and employees were hoping to survive through the holidays. We'd set up a ton of outdoor dining patios, spaces, outdoor heaters, etc., and then it was shut down. And when that happened, there was just a collective, kind of hands up response. Restaurants started shutting down. Employees all lost their jobs. I mean, thousands of employees by virtue of these restaurants closing. And it coincided, it was this kind of perfect storm. I hate the word perfect when describing this, where there was no unemployment benefits available for people because they had misappropriated about $50 billion in unemployment funds here in California. And even in other states, it wasn't necessarily always misappropriation, but because so much unemployment money going from federal to state was being distributed, the whole system kind of turned into this gridlock. And people just couldn't.
When you say the funds were misappropriated, where did they go? What do you mean?
Well, here in California, they went to fraudsters. A lot of people, there was a lot of these kind of coordinated operations from prisons where people were applying for massive amounts of funds and they were getting them. It was there was fake, just a ton of international fake accounts set up. I mean, the system just got duped. They just started sending money out everywhere.
So are you talking specifically about the PPP program or other?
I'm talking about unemployment benefits.
You're talking about I don't even know how that happens. Like I know people who got rejected for unemployment, and they're good, honest people. Like I don't know how this happens, but hey, it's California, I guess.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised people got rejected because in this case, the way I think it happened here in California was there was just this massive inflow of money, federal money to assist with that, and the state had unemployment funds, and there were so many applications coming in that eventually they were just kind of rubber stamping them, and I think people caught on to that, and then there was just this immediate system of fraud that was set up. But to make, to kind of get to the point here. So what we did was we had a ton of people reaching out saying, look, like we can't put food on the table. We can't pay bills, utilities, put Christmas gifts under the tree for the kids. We just need a couple dollars to bridge, hopefully until January, February, when things start to open back up again. So we put out the goal to only try and raise about $5,000. We figured we'd help 10 families, immediate families within our orbit that we knew, $500 per family to kind of bridge into January. And then it really just morphed into something much bigger. We've raised over $400,000 already, and we started distributing money throughout the entire country. And that was the genesis of 86 Restaurant Struggle, which we are still growing and building out. Eventually, I'll roll it into a 501c3. So the initial drive was, of course, to raise the funds, but then we have tried to develop it into something bigger, somewhat of more of a networking opportunity, because we're trying to also connect a lot of these team members and employees that we've met through this application process with either employers or just people within the system that can help them to either transition, pivot, etc., as you mentioned.
I think this is a very noble cause that you're doing, although it seems daunting. And can you tell us how successful your initiative? It's called 86 Struggle once again, and the website is 86. That's a number 86struggle.com. Can you tell us how you guys are doing, how much you've raised, and the feedback you've gotten?
Yeah, we've raised over $400,000. I mean, the feedback has been great. We have expanded the program, which originally was just for struggling restaurant workers. And now that the paradigm has flipped a little bit and you've got employers that are now looking for more workers, we have less applications for workers because the unemployment system is kind of caught up a bit. So people are now able to retroactively get some of the benefits that they were missing before. But now we're really targeting and trying to help small independent food operations, whether it's a catering companies, food trucks, kind of one-off restaurants, mom and pop restaurants who are struggling through the restrictions, if you will, at 50% capacity in many states, or even in Washington and Oregon recently, they shut down again even a couple of weeks ago. So there's still a lot of hiccups within the industry, and we're trying to act as a bridge to be able to help people so that they don't go under, so they can bridge to the next step, whether that's getting money from the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, PPP funds, employee retention credits, or just getting to the point of being open and then being able to financially cash flow out of this. We want to be that little stepping stone.
We have celebrity chef Andrew Gruel on the show. Andrew, I'm in Florida. Adam, my co-host, is in Austin, Texas. So Florida and Texas, the restrictions weren't as stringent. The lockdowns certainly weren't as stringent. In fact, Florida tried to open up in May of 2020. So they shut down essentially for a month. And the governor even said that looking back, he thinks that was even a mistake. I'm not a fan of lockdowns, but I was okay with shutting down for 1 month in April of 2020. But with all that being said, right now, the problem that I'm seeing everywhere, I drive down the street, we just took a vacation, came back, and every restaurant we went to had signs saying we are understaffed, please bear with us. And you drive down the street and there's every billboard, every sign says we're hiring. We just upped our wages. McDonald's here in Florida, they're offering you $50 just to come in and interview, and they raised their pay by, I think, $2 an hour. So at least here in Florida, and I heard in Texas, this is similar, where it's the opposite. They're understaffed and they're trying to hire more people. But one of the problems with the federal system is you're essentially incentivized to stay at home and not work. And so that's why there is such a labor there's such a labor problem, at least where I am. I don't know if that's a situation in California, but I'm sure you've heard about this. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it definitely is an issue. There's a lot of reasons that I think contribute to this. Restaurants are struggling hardcore to get employees in. I don't necessarily think it's an issue about wages per se, as a lot of people would suggest right now, because it's primarily entry-level jobs. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that in certain areas, wages haven't caught up with inflation, and there definitely is a wage conversation to be had. But what we're seeing is people are just afraid to get back to the workplace because they don't know if they're going to be shut down again in many states. In other states, they can't get the child care that they need, so they stay home to watch their kids because schools are closed. And in many situations, people have left the workforce, the retail workforce, and they're moving into other career paths. They're staying away from restaurants and retail because it's a hostile environment right now. Young 18, 19, 20-year-olds do not want to act as, security guards for social distancing, wearing masks, and dealing with a public that's been locked up for a year and is just not too friendly, if you will, to put it lightly.
Well, that's why we have our show, the Work From Home Show. We teach people how they can build skills, make money from home. So, sorry, restaurant industry, if we're taking away workers from your space. But I do believe that 2022 will be a great year for employment because this pandemic is dying. I'll tell you, here in Florida and in Texas, where I'm from, people have moved on. They're back out. The restaurants are packed. Like I said, we just came back from vacation and we visited several resorts and hotels, and every single one of them was booked solid. Not a single room was open at these places. So I do think 2022 is going to be the year where we'll get back to full employment. People are going to get back, hit the workforce. I'm not buying the pandemic excuse that people are afraid to go in because they think they're going to get infected. But I do believe some of the answers that you gave, some people made career shifts, picked up new skills, found other ways to make money. Yep. I do think that's had a bigger impact. And I still do believe that many people just don't want to, they'd rather collect unemployment or stimulus or whatever it is, because I'll tell you, my the landscaping in my house has not been touched for close to 5 months now, because I've gone through 4 or 5 different companies, and every single one of them initially took on the project and then they never came because they said, my people quit. They worked for like 5 days and then quit so they could go back on unemployment, or I just have no one to work for me, and they've never gone through this before. So anyway, I think as the governments pull back from providing all this stimulus, people will get back to work, and we're going to see a jobs boom, an economic boom in 2022, including in the restaurant industry. That's just my prediction.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do think that there's certainly, supply is going to catch up with demand when it comes to the workforce. I think that the wheels are already in motion when it comes to digitizing and mechanizing a lot of the jobs that humans cannot fill right now. And
Yep.
whether they can't fill the jobs merely by virtue of the fact that the government is kind of competing with employers, but through their unemployment fund, I think that it's already restaurants are saying, we just can't run into this issue again where we get caught with our pants down and we can't even open 7 days a week, full hours. We've got to start figuring out ways, whether it's co-packing products off-site, decreasing the units of labor that are required on-site, kiosks. I've seen burger flipping machines. I've seen products now getting shipped in from all over as opposed to made on site, as I mentioned. There's a lot of different ways in which you can do this. The problem with the restaurant industry, going back to the name of this show, is you can't necessarily work from home, right? I've always joked in the beginning of the pandemic, I said, all my restaurant workers are going to be working from home, so your orders are going to come from their houses.
That's funny. Well, what I did not see coming was this labor shortage, and I'm not surprised by it now in hindsight. But what does somewhat surprise me is even the big players like Walmart and McDonald's and Chipotle. I own quite a bit of Chipotle stock, so I follow what's going on there. And I don't know if you've been following, but they have to shut down, I think, tens of restaurants. It could be over 100 now, but they have to shut down temporarily shut down tens of Chipotles around the country because they had no one to work there. Literally, there were 0 people they had to work there. And if you don't have people who want to work for you, then you can't run the business. You might have a good product, you might have a nice burritos, but I like Chipotle. They got good sofritas, good burritos. But if you can't have people to make those or take payment or whatnot, even just one person, maybe you can take online orders, but one person can't handle it all. They ended up shutting down, and they announced a new compensation. I think they called it their like 6-figure compensation plan, where they are not promising, but they are promoting the idea that you could make $100,000 within, I think it was 4 years, starting out flipping burritos. And within 4 years, you'll be able to make $100,000 as a manager at a Chipotle store. And they did this to encourage people to work there because there is a shortage. And other companies like McDonald's, I mentioned, they're paying $50 just to show up for an interview. And I think they give you a free meal with that. And then on top of that, they raised wages by in some places as much as $3 an hour. So on the one hand, it's good for the minimum wage, the minimum wage advocates who have been calling, we need to raise wages. Now you've naturally done it without a government mandate. So I think that's good for the economy and for this great reset. But on the other hand, I just never imagined that these big players would be struggling to attract talent to work and to work at their companies. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, of course, especially coming out of the pandemic where it was so hard, right? So many people got laid off. And I think that there's certainly been, look, I think a lot of this has to do with just a shock to the system and the need for people. It's like you get up in the morning and you're kind of slow to get going some days. And I think America's been, we're slowly getting up in the morning away from this pandemic. So it might be slow to catch up, and people need to just really kind of wrap their arms back around the idea of getting in and follow, kind of following through on some of their original goals and objectives pre-pandemic. I think that's part of it. And there's a psychology to probably support that. When it comes to Chipotle, I would suggest that they aren't really changing anything internally, but they're just framing the ways in which they're marketing their jobs. Because I know that Chipotle managers were making or had the potential to make 6 figures. I mean, over a certain period of time. How many do hit that goal? It's probably a lot fewer than you would imagine. But it's important that they do mention. I mean, the restaurant industry as a whole is always thought of as this like in-between industry, right? Like a stepping stone industry, but there are major opportunities in restaurant and hospitality to make it a career and make significant amounts of money. It's starting from flipping burritos, burgers, packing salads, whatever you want to use. It certainly is the opportunities are there. But once again, like I said, I think that the workforce is certainly going to change over the next couple of years. I think we're seeing a lot of digitization, a lot of mechanization. I think it's going to take away some of the human element when it comes to food, which isn't necessarily a good thing, although I think it's already starting to happen in fast casual and quick service. So it's going to be an interesting couple of years coming out of this pandemic. And I think that the ripple effect is multiple years. I do not think we're going to be back to, quote, normal in months. I think it's going to take a couple of years.
Do you think the restaurant industry was unfairly punished by politicians, medical leaders during the pandemic, even post-pandemic? Because I got that feel with the whole essential business versus non-essential business. Now you're creating a hierarchy of how important one's job is and the value that one's job provides to society. I felt like it was incredibly unfairly punished, but what do you think?
Yeah, 100%. The restaurant industry specifically was really vilified as this industry that was so risky that you could find yourself in an epicenter of spread. And that wasn't the case at all, because restaurant workers all have their food handlers cards. We were inherently prepared to establish safe environments where you can operate a business, but also pay attention to the necessary requirements of this pandemic. But instead, we were shut down, and we were constantly blamed as the areas or the vectors whereby the COVID was spreading when that wasn't the case at all. And then we weren't allowed to open, but large businesses that were effectively doing the exact same thing restaurants were doing, right? Because if you have a Walmart and then in the front of a Walmart, they have like a Burger King and you get a burger to go and you're walking around Walmart eating your burger without a mask on and then piling on top of one another in the takeout area, how's that any different than going into a restaurant or outside, sitting outside at a restaurant with friends and family, socially distanced from any other tables and eating, right? It's not any different. And it's probably safer to go to the restaurant than it is Walmart. Heck, it was probably more dangerous to go to Walmart prior to the pandemic anyway. But, you know, so now what it's done is it's established winners and losers. It's divided everybody. It's created a situation where people are pointing fingers as of blame when we don't even really know and understand, because the science is all over the place. The data is all over the place. I mean, causation doesn't always, or correlation doesn't always mean causation when it comes to looking at some of these numbers. So it's been certainly frustrating as a restaurateur to see the ways in which we've been treated.
I really feel for your industry because, like I mentioned, Florida, May of 2020, all restaurants open back up. Governor said, you're opening back up. You're back in business. Whereas I remember reading or hearing the governor of California, I want to say in October, he said, "Oh, we'll open some of the restaurants, but you have to wear a face mask inside, and you need to wear your mask in between bites. So if you're eating a burger, you take your bite, and then you put the face mask back on, you chew, and then you want to take another bite, you take the face mask off, take the bite, but then you have to put it back on." I said, this is all. Again, you brought up the science is all over the place. To me, it sounds. I don't want to eat at a restaurant where I have to put on a face mask in between bites. I mean, that if anything, that just makes the face mask oily and dirty and just filthy. And these rules, they deter people like me from even going to a restaurant. Unfortunately, I live in a state where I could freely go to a restaurant and eat and not have to worry about getting my face mask dirty or even wearing a face mask while eating my veggie burger. But it's not just restaurants have to shut down. It's these, I think, dumb and unscientific rules that politicians and medical professionals tried to implement without any science. There was no science. I tried looking on the internet for journals or papers that said you should wear a face mask in between bites at a restaurant. I couldn't find anything. And all this just hurts the restaurant industry.
It's theater. It's all theater. I mean, that's all it is. It's optics, and it's going to have a long lasting effect on the restaurant industry. You're correct.
And then the other area that I wanted to talk about is they kept changing the rules in the middle, saying first, restaurants need to shut down. Now you can open, but you need to spend all this money on outdoor seating, and there must be some kind of fire pit, and there must be, socially distant seats and special tables and special chairs. And I'm sure maybe you had to do this, but this is mostly in like the Northeast, California. So you have to go out, spend tens of thousands of dollars just so you could have people come eat at your establishment. And then they came back after, a month or two later saying, oh, you know what? We're not allowing that anymore. You have to shut down again. And again, this is cruel. This is very cruel. And I hope the restaurant industry, as a leader in the restaurant industry, you should be putting up a fight against these medical leaders and against these politicians for trying to destroy your industry and changing the rules in the middle of the game. I find this to be cruel. It's not even unfair. It's not a question of fairness. It's just, at this point, it's cruelty.
Yeah. Well, you're 100% correct. And the unfortunate reality is that because it's broken down state by state, and a lot of these trade organizations are national and really only, they only work closely with the large multi-unit national corporations, there isn't necessarily a voice that's percolating on the ground floor in a grassroots manner that's fighting back and pushing back on behalf of the restaurant industry. I mean, I've stuck my neck out there and tried to be as vocal as possible, and I've used goodwill, right, by virtue of our fund, to act as a vehicle through which we can start to engage and have these conversations. And they don't need to be, it's not vitriolic, right? Like it's just an honest and open conversation looking at the data, both anecdotal and scientific, to say, okay, is this really the ways in which we need to assess risk? And can we change the messaging in regards to the ways in which we're treating restaurants and ultimately affecting the livelihoods? Because the ecosystem surrounding restaurants doesn't just include front of the house, back of the house employees. It's the supply chain, their families, brokers, distribution, all the way to the end source, from the farmer to the fish farmer to the fisherman, etc. So it's a much bigger conversation, I think, than people realize.
Do you think the United States, maybe government, needs to get involved? Do you think they should do away with the current pay structure of restaurant employees and make them less reliant on tips?
That's a great question. I don't, it's funny. A lot of people would suggest that tips are subsidizing wages that restaurants should be paying their workers. I don't fully agree with that, because their margins are so slim in the restaurant industry right now that in the absence of any of the tips and wages go up, menu prices are going to have to go up to justify that, or the restaurants are going to go under. But I do believe that people actually want to tip, right? People like offering this extra tip, and it makes them feel good too, right? It cuts both ways. And if you ask any of my employees, they do not want to get rid of tips, because they want to know that perhaps every day's a lottery. They could bag that elephant, right? Like they could get that $100 tip on a $10 bill because somebody's feeling extra friendly.
Yeah. And I've said this on a previous episode. We went, my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, we went to Cuba 2016, December. So it was a while ago. And in Cuba, communist country, you grow up aspiring to become a waiter or waitress, because you have to be able to speak English to be a good waiter or waitress. And you make a killing off of tips, because the tourists, they come in and they're tipping 15%, right? And whereas in Cuba, the average person is making like less than $10 a day, whereas you're getting a tip of $10 per hour at least, being a waiter or waitress. So it's just I think tips, certainly I think the current pay structure makes a lot of sense. I've never worked in the restaurant industry, but it's all about the tips, just like in real estate. It's all about the commissions, right? You could get paid a salary of, $40,000-$50,000 a year, but you'll probably make a lot more selling one luxury mansion, high-end luxury mansion, than you would being salaried at $40,000 or $50,000 a year.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
Well, last question before we roll out. This is the work from home show. So to our listeners at home, do you have some quick or easy recipes or dishes that our work from homers can quickly make, or maybe in between meetings? What would your recommendations be?
Yeah, I'm all about seafood. So get yourself a fillet of salmon or any of your favorite fish. Use your oven, right? People try and sear things, cook things in multiple pans. Just one sheet pan in the oven, 250, 300 degrees, slow roast. Throw on piece of fish. Just rub it down in extra virgin olive oil, some fresh herbs, citrus, and if you want to throw on that pan just at the last second, a couple tortilla shells, you got yourself a real simple taco setup.
Huh, really good. Wow. That sounds quite good. I hope our listeners were able to take away some good nuggets from that excellent interview with Chef Andrew Gruel. The website is chefgruel, Gruel.com, chefgruel.com. Also his restaurants, slapfishrestaurant.com. And then his initiative, 86 Struggle. That's 86struggle.com, the number 86struggle.com. Chef Andrew, any final thoughts or anything else you want to promote to our listeners?
Nope. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Definitely an honor.
Yeah, well, it's an honor interviewing you. To all our listeners, check us out at workfromhomeshow.com. That's www.workfromhomeshow.com. Visit our website. Email us if you have any questions. hello@workfromhomeshow.com. That's hello@workfromhomeshow.com. You can check us out on all social media. We're on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, all podcasting platforms out there. And until next week, keep on working from home.